like a houseboat. This is how a founder of one of Silicon Valley's best-known venture firms described businesses using technology to solve the world's biggest problems. Like a houseboat, not a great house, not a great boat. There were 2 points he was trying to make. One was that if you wanted to solve big problems, you should start, join, or fund a nonprofit, or maybe go work in government. But don't use startups, because those are bad tools for that. And his second point was that startups that are trying to solve the world's biggest problems will underperform ones that don't on a purely financial basis. We couldn't disagree with him more. These startups are not houseboats. In our estimation, these startups are more like Tesla Roadsters. It's an amazing car, and it's also helping decarbonize an entire industry. So I have a hunch that most of you already believe the first point, that startups are a great tool to solve the world's biggest problems. We've seen this over COVID. The mRNA vaccines that are in many of our bodies right now, protecting us from this disease, were developed by 2 startups, Moderna and BioNTech. Other pharma companies developed antivirals that have now made COVID less deadly than the flu. And we have many other great examples, from Tesla, which is decarbonizing an entire industry, to Hometown Bolt, which is making transportation more sustainable while giving us our cities back, to the myriad of startups that have radically driven down the cost and increased the adoption of renewable technologies like solar. Now, I'm a venture capitalist, and so I am legally required to tell you about some of the startups in our own portfolio that are doing this. So we've got a couple companies that are radically improving the state of the world from space. One, called Yuri, is doing drug development in space. Sounds crazy. Why would you want to develop drugs in space when you can do that on Earth? Well, one of the most popular approaches to drug development is called structural biology. You literally look at the shape of a protein, and you find a docket that it has, and you literally stick a small molecule into that little part of the protein, and you can disable the protein. And in order to do this, you've got to figure out what the protein looks like. And some proteins are so small that they're incredibly difficult to examine on Earth. Well, it turns out that when you grow them in space, protein crystals grow 10 times as large, and so you can grow really large crystals, look at their shape, find drugs to drug them. We have another company called Varda, which is manufacturing high-value materials in space. Things like semiconductors or fiber optic cables or drugs. Oftentimes gravity gets in the way of manufacturing them, and if you do it in space, you can make much higher quality products without any of the pollution getting into our atmosphere. We have several companies in the cellular agriculture space. This is a space that's replacing the 4,000-year-old technology of growing mammals so that we can raise them, kill them, cut them up, take their meat and milk, and put it into our food products. Why would we not want to do it that way? Well, it's incredibly destructive for the environment. Animal agriculture contributes more to climate change than all of transportation combined. It's also, of course, not very good for the animals, and it's not particularly good for human health. There are many companies now that are using the exact same biology that the animal uses, but just outside of the animal, to make the exact same products that we love without any of the problems. And finally, we have startups, Astranis and Utivate and Ukama, that are connecting the 3.5 billion people who currently have no connection to the internet. Studies have shown that everything gets better when you connect people to the internet. Health outcomes improve, education improves, civil society gets more stable, everything gets better. So I think it's obvious that technology entrepreneurship is a really good, if not the best lever for solving many of our biggest problems. But I want to talk about his second point, that these aren't great businesses. Is it compromise? If you want to start or join or fund companies using technologies to address the world's biggest problems, do you have to accept lower financial performance? So to think about this, I want to introduce a concept called all else being equal. The basic idea here will be very familiar to many researchers, which is basically you want to try and isolate only the thing you're examining and ignore everything else. And so what we're going to try and do here is say if two companies are equal in every way, except for one, and that one thing being that one of them is addressing a big world problem and one of them is not, which one has an advantage or disadvantage? So one useful frame of reference to apply this is talent. If you ask the CEO of a fast-growing startup, why are you not growing even faster? The most common response you'll hear is, I just can't hire great people fast enough. At some point, talent becomes a constraint on growth. So now imagine you have two companies both competing for the same machine learning engineer. And these companies are equal in every way but one. The founders are equally charismatic. The teams are equally kind and talented. They have the exact same growth rate. Their margins are the same. They're literally headquartered right across the street from one another. There's only one difference between these two companies. One of them is selling sneakers on the internet, and the other is working to cure cancer. Which one, intuitively, do you think has a higher likelihood of recruiting that machine learning engineer? It's pretty obvious when you think about it that way. But this applies to more than just talent. If you happen to be a reporter in the room, ask yourself, which story would you rather write? A story about an NFT, metaverse, monkey startup, or an article about a startup that's making carbon negative chemicals to decarbonize the chemicals industry? Which story would you be more proud to write? If you're an engineer, ask yourself, if you had two roles and all else was equal, and one of them was building a SaaS application to increase sales conversion by 4.5%, and the other was decarbonizing the home industry by building homes like Tesla builds cars using computation and automation. Which company would you rather work for? Which one would you be more proud to work for? If you're an investor, ask yourself, all else being equal, if you had two companies, both machine learning companies, one using machine learning to optimize marketing spend and another using machine learning to treat cancer, which one would you rather invest in? Now, the all else is still really important. Just because you're solving one of the world's biggest problems doesn't mean business fundamentals don't still apply. If you're using market forces as your lever to solve problems, you still have to play by market rules. You still need great margins, you still need a good growth rate, you still need customer demand, you still need to build a great team. We have a test that we apply at 50 years called the Mr. Burns test. Mr. Burns, for those that don't know, is a character from the animated show The Simpsons. He's sort of the archetype of a greedy industrial capitalist who only cares about himself and nobody else and just making himself richer. We want to see that a company has a path to building a product that Mr. Burns would buy once that company's at scale. It's fine if in the early days their customers are people that care about sustainability or care about health and are therefore willing to pay more or accept a lower quality product. But at scale, they need to build a product that someone who doesn't care at all about the impact would buy. That's how you win using market forces. But now, assuming all else is equal, this is a pretty easy question, right? We all want to do good in our careers. We all want to have impact. And this is why companies that are solving the world's biggest problems aren't compromises. And in fact, they have a huge advantage against companies that don't. It's easier for them to recruit and retain top talent. It's easier for them to get press and friendly press. They have a lower cost of capital. because more investors want to fund these types of things. And studies have shown customers of these types of companies are more forgiving of mistakes and become more loyal once those mistakes stop happening. All of this leads to better financial performance. These are fundamentally better businesses than companies that are not solving the world's biggest problems, all else being equal. So don't ever let anyone tell you that these aren't great businesses. We can look at just one example from our portfolio, a company called Solugen. We had the great fortune of becoming the first investor in this company about 5 years ago when Sean and Gaurav, the founders, had nothing but a 2-foot-tall PVC prototype and a dream to one day make carbon-negative chemicals. 5 years later, this is now a greater than $100 million annual run rate business. They have a beautiful 60-foot-tall reactor in Houston that makes over 15,000 tons per year of their carbon-negative chemicals, and they recently reached a valuation of nearly $2 billion. And as someone who's helped the Solugen team close many candidates, I can tell you that their mission was incredibly important in them being able to build the team that they have. Yes, the cool technology mattered, the fact that they had a great business mattered, the fact that the existing team was great mattered, but the fact that they were out to decarbonize one of the most destructive industries on Earth helped them recruit people they otherwise would not have been able to. And it's not just Solugen. We recently looked at our first fund and found that 20% of the teams we backed are now unicorns. That's 1 in 6 companies that we backed at the pre-seed or seed stage that have now reached $1 billion plus valuation. Don't let anyone tell you that these can't be great businesses. So what is the real compromise here? If companies solving the world's biggest problems maybe have tailwinds that will allow them to outcompete ones that don't from a financial perspective, maybe business as usual is the compromise. There's basically 4 things that everyone wants in their careers. We all want to work with people that we like and respect. We want to work on interesting problems. We want to make money, and we want to do good. You can have all 4 of those things. For the longest time, we were told that you could choose 2 or 3, but it's not true anymore. We live in absolutely amazing times where we can use technology entrepreneurship to solve some of the biggest problems and create a world of no compromises. We can create a world of sustainable abundance where we can travel where we want and wear what we want and eat what we want and make what we want while having a completely sustainable planet. And you will be more fulfilled if you join or start or fund these types of companies. You will have more energy, you'll probably have more friends, and you'll have, if the data is right, more success. And not only is this good for you, but the world needs you to step up. The people here in this room, you all have incredible talents. You can help build that world of no compromises. And so I encourage you to not compromise and to get building. Thank you.
Thank you so much.